Good morning. I would like to welcome you all this morning from my living room in Belgium to this session on smart grids and flexibility markets, status of demonstrators and effect of COVID-19 on the demo operation and results, organized by the Bridge Working Group on Regulation. I'm Chris Kessels and I'm a senior researcher in the energy market team of V2 Energyville, and I'm here with you in the capacity of co-chair of the Bridge Working Group on Regulation. The other chair of this working group, Manuel Serrano, will give a presentation later in this session. I will be moderating this session together with Thomas Mikkelsen, who will be joining us later. Thomas is CEO of GECO Global, specialized in customer behavior and the green transition of the energy industry. Thomas also leads the Joint Communication Task Force in the Bridge Initiative. Although the energy system has proven to be very resilient during the COVID-19 crisis, it's fair to say that the last months have been very challenging, and the COVID crisis has affected us all, both in our personal and professional lives. During this session, we will present a few examples on how this crisis has impacted the research and demonstration activities of some of the Horizon 2020 projects participating in Bridge. But more importantly, we want to show how these projects have tackled these challenges, sharing with you their lessons learned and also their changed strategy for the future. Next slide, please. First, a few practical points. So to allow you to ask questions, we will use Slido. You do not need to connect. It's immediately integrated in your screen. You should see it before you, and you can use this at any time to pose your questions, and you can also vote on your favorite questions so that they get higher up in the list. We will also be launching a poll later in this session via Slido, and at the end of the session, there will be a short survey on this session, so we would be very glad to get your feedback. Of course, you can stay anonymous if you want, but otherwise, please add your name so that we can refer to you when reading your question. Now we will go to the schedule of the session. So next slide. I will first share some results of a mini survey we did to gather inputs on the impacts faced by the Bridge projects due to the COVID-19 crisis. And then we will give the floor to some of the projects which will go more in detail on their experiences. So we divided the session in 3 parts. The first part shares the experience of 3 projects. You see it, Crossbow, Coordinate and Integrate, and they faced resource unavailability due to the strict confinement rules and also the lack of coherent data. As quite some projects also focus on international collaboration, also outside the European Union. During the second part, we will look at the learnings of the iElectrics project on the cooperation with India. And the third part will focus on customer engagement and how this has been affected during the crisis with the example of the MuseGrid projects. And then we will leave some time for a round table with all speakers, exploring how the energy transition can be affected by the crisis or by future ones. So now we can really start. So next slide, please. So we did a mini survey with the projects which are part of the Bridge Regulation Working Group, and we posed them 4 questions. So we asked them whether they face any problems regarding the engagement of customers, the implementation of their demo, the interpretation of data, and international collaboration, mainly outside the EU. In total, we received 18 responses, and 5 projects out of the 18 said that they did not face any issues regarding COVID. And it's of course important to note that answers depend a lot on the phase the project is currently in. So projects which are still in early startup phase will have very different challenges than projects which will end soon. When looking at the graph on screen, so need to go one down. It's apparent that most projects face issues regarding the practical implementation of their demo and regarding the engagement of customers. International collaboration is foreseen in quite some of these projects and was also impacted, as you see in the graph. Only 2 projects reported data interpretation issue. It's, however, quite likely that the impact of changed energy patterns will only become apparent later in a few months. So on the next slide, we made a very short summary of all the answers received. it's not complete and we don't have the time to go into the details, but I will mention a few main points, and colleagues of projects will go more in detail on their challenges. So regarding customer engagement, it's not so unexpected that establishing contacts was more difficult, as direct physical contacts, for example, via workshops, was not possible, and digital communication channels turned out to be less successful to reach out to customers. The issues raised concerning the implementation of demos were mostly more from a practical technical nature, as it was just very difficult to access the sites, certainly when it was inside homes. And COVID-19 crisis also caused a lot of delays in development, decision-making process, manufacturing, leading to delays in the projects. The effect on the data of the demos can mostly be found in the change of energy profiles, so that it's difficult to distinguish between the demo and the COVID-19 effect. And finally, in the view of international collaboration, we have learned that using digital communication channels is not straightforward in regions which are more remote, and we just cannot travel there, probably also not the coming months. In the next slide, I will now introduce the different speakers, which will give a presentation on their project that they represent. So our first speaker is Manuel Serrano. As I already said, he's also co-chair for the Bridge Working Group on Regulation, and he's the head of new technologies within ETRA. He's coordinator of the Horizon 2020 Crossbow project and will share their experience. Our second speaker is Yvonne Ruwaida. She's business strategist at Vattenfall, and she will share the experience of the Coordinate project, where she is leading the Swedish demonstrator. The next speaker is Ricardo André. He works in the Unit European Projects and Policies at EDP, and he's currently coordinating the Integrate project. Then Pierre-Jacques Lecalec will take over. Pierre-Jacques is a project director at Enedis, and he's coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project, iElectrics, and management of the Indian demonstrator. Last but not least, then Johanna Höfken will take over. She is an assistant professor in the group Technology, Innovation and Society at Eindhoven University of Technology, and she will share the experience of the MuseGrids project. As we have a very tight schedule, we will now go to the different presentations. So good morning, Manuel. I now give the floor to you so that you can share the experience of Crossbow.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. And it's nice to be here sharing this experience. It would have been better to be able to meet physically, but this is the time we live, and these are the constraints we have to face. So you can go to the next slide, please. And the next one. Just one more click. Perfect. That's it. So I will briefly give you, in just 1 minute, an introduction on what Crossbow is about. And then I will go directly to the point on the troubles we have faced due to the COVID crisis and how we have been forced to adapt ourselves and our plan to deal with it. So Crossbow, as most of the projects being presented today, is a demonstration-oriented project, quite big, 22 million euros of budget that started back in November 2017, and that if nothing goes wrong, will end in October next year. We count with 13 countries and 8 transmission system operators, and the main focus of the project is to provide different tools to these system operators to allow a higher penetration of renewables in Southeast Europe, which is the part of Europe where our activities, our demonstrations are focusing on. And these tools have been packaged in a set of 9 different products that will result in 9 different demonstrations. And each one of them has suffered in different manner the crisis. If we go to next slide, please. So and just one more click. Next, please. So from the 9, come back, please. 9 November 2020, 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 9 November Here it is. So from the 9 products we have and the 9 different developments that we are offering to the system operators, only 2 of them managed to or are managing to go through the crisis without receiving a direct impact. And this is only because these 2 products somehow are the basis for the other products. We provide a tool set to trade energy and ancillary services, and we provide also a wide area monitoring and alert system that serves as the basis for retrieval of data feeding the other solutions. And only these 2 products are the ones that when the crisis started, we were confident that because they were deployed by the end of last year, that they were not going to be impacted. For all the other 7 ones, we have faced different troubles, and it has required a lot of effort to keep them in track in order not to block some of the actions scheduled in the project. We are happy that none of the solutions will not be able to be demonstrated in the field, because this is one of the specific characteristics of our project. We try all the solutions to be deployed and experimented in the field by the end users, by the system operators. And at the current stage, none of our solutions is in risk. But as I said, it has required a lot of effort. If we go to next slide. Basically, the crisis impacted us in 3 different manners. The most critical one, or the most important one, was the availability of some resources. For the 3 products that were oriented to system operators of to the regional security center in Belgrade, we were counting during the demonstration phase to run experiments in the premises of the end users and with the direct support of the personnel, of the key personnel running the systems, and this resulted impossible. I can anticipate you that through the countermeasures we implemented, this is something that we weren't able to overcome. At some point during the COVID crisis, the critical personnel at the operators were not only working from home, some of them were actually locked down as part of a security protocol to be sure that the energy supply was not jeopardized by any means. And obviously, there was no possibility to run experiments and interact with this critical personnel. Next slide, please. The second nature of impact we received was related to, obviously, and I suppose this is common to all projects, to the restriction to visit other countries. In our particular case, this was really a high, or this has a really high impact on these 2 products. The product that was exploring the aggregation of batteries in a virtual storage plant, and the hybrid plant merging batteries and different means of renewable production. It has a big impact because we were relying on the first part of our deployment phase to deploy the solutions in laboratory and run some preliminary experiments. It was a schedule actually for some partners to be visiting other countries for large periods of 1 month, 2 months, and this was obviously out of the table the minute the borders were closed. Even more, even for local partners, they had to tackle severe restrictions to access their own laboratories, and for long periods of time, it was impossible to access the laboratories, to implement some of the countermeasures to keep running the project. So if it was not going to be possible to run some experiments in the field, the natural next step was to, try to do something in the laboratories. But even that was hard with the 2 main laboratories that we were counting within the project, one in Athens and one in Zagreb, which in addition they suffer an earthquake. So even for them, the situation was even a little bit worse. Next slide, please. And last but not least, the third type of impact that we suffer is not exactly the same as our fellow projects, MuseGrid, with the troubles to engage end users. Our project Crossbow doesn't coordinate or has to collaborate with domestic consumers, but we do count on certain interactions with third parties out of our consortium. Specifically, for the demand-side management platform, we had some experiments already planned with large industrial consumers, and for the cooperative flexibility platform, we had also experiments that required the participation of some electricity cooperatives. By the end of the day, we were able to keep these contacts and even to keep some of the experiments just with an overhead of coordination with electronic means. But it requires a much greater effort, especially a much bigger effort and much more time than it was originally anticipated. Next slide. Now, okay. So for the countermeasures, the important things. Well, we have tried to, for this session, to focus on the things that goes a little bit beyond the straightforward rescheduling of activities. I mean, this is something I suppose all the projects and any company has had to face. Reschedule actions and reschedule the timing of how the year was supposed to happen. So beyond that, beyond postponing deployment or demonstrations and advancing some development, we have tried to implement some other countermeasures very specific to our reality in Crossbow, but allowing us not to delay the project and by the end of the day, keep on track. I have to say that rescheduling activities, though it's the most natural option, is not always possible, and in our case it was not even desirable. We wanted the project to keep running. In our time plan, the developments were ending in May, and they did end in May, and we needed some experiments and deployment activities in order not to block the project and be sit down for some months without activity. We have done that through a number of alternatives to the original plan. Next slide, please. So, first countermeasure or first thing we were able to implement, well, our demonstration plan, the period of time we dedicated to experiments, started in January. In our project, we have two large periods of experiments, one from January to June this year, and then the other one from October to May next year. So this resulted in being at least able to capture data for 1 month before the crisis was actually a fact in Europe. And with this data, we were able to emulate certain experiments and at least be able to run these experiments offline for technical validation of developers. This countermeasure didn't help to avoid delays on the deployment activities. It didn't help either to get the validation of the end user, which is critical for us, but it helped us to keep the process running and to keep some refinement in the tools that we were developing. Next slide, please. The other countermeasure we implemented was once in May, we started having access again to the laboratories. We took this very preliminary data and tried to reconfigure some of the laboratories to emulate part of the grids that were supposed to participate in the experiments in the field. This again didn't solve the issue of avoiding further delays on the deployment, but it enabled us to incorporate end users little by little, at least to have an offline validation of the tools, okay, which is helping us to prepare the experiments that we have indeed postponed and will be running now in summer, and then of course next year. Next slide, please. So what we have learned from this experience? Well, first thing, it is good to plan for some contingency time window in research. This is something we already incorporate in our time plans. So from the end of the development phase to the start of the demonstration activities, there is a time window to enable refinements of developments, to enable also to advance some demonstrations if we feel that the conditions allows for it. And this contingency time window that was already in our time plan has helped us to overcome some of the troubles. It is also of interest to try to use an agile approach and incorporate end users at the experiments already during the development phase, and try to get early data as soon as possible. It's not always easy to engage third parties at the early stages, basically because there's nothing to offer them in exchange. Okay, if we start the project with not yet anything deployed, not yet anything to be shown, it is difficult to engage third parties, but it is convenient. And last but not least, something that we have agreed internally in the project, though we know it's controversial and not everyone agrees, we think and we have realized that there's a lot of things that can be substituted with virtual meetings, with conf calls, with emails, but not everything. In a large consortium as this one, with 24 partners, we have had to employ a lot of resources to overcome the unavailability, not necessarily to meet all of us, but even peer-to-peer meetings with some of the partners. If things goes the way they go now, we will be probably not meeting with our colleagues in the project for more than 6 months, probably 1 year, and this is something that we need to readdress. Next slide, just to conclude, because I'm running out of time.
Yes, you are a bit behind schedule, so
yeah.
Maybe conclude very shortly.
Yeah, just to introduce some of the ideas for the last slot of the session. How we see that the energy transition could be affected by the crisis? Well, we're already observing new demand patterns, which could lead to more self-consumption in the long term, which is affecting the market because there's less demand at this stage, which encourage us to think that we will need more resilience and self-healing grids. Okay, we don't need to expose people in the maintenance or the operations of the grid at crisis times. So it is necessary for more resilience and self-healing equipment. And last but not least, though we don't like it, mobility patterns are also affected, and this could also jeopardize the penetration of greener vehicles in the future. So that's all from my side for Crossbow, and I will be giving now the floor to Yvonne, who will be presenting similar troubles that have been faced by the Coordinate project.
My name is Yvonne Rueda, and I'm a business strategist at Vattenfall Distribution. And I'm also here in the capacity of the work package leader of the Swedish demonstration in Coordinet. Next slide. So Coordinet is a large-scale TSO, DSO consumer demonstration. And we have demonstrations in Sweden, in Spain, and in Greece. And we started in January, and we are 33 parties. And our objective is to demonstrate the activation and provision of services through a TSO-DSO coordination, to define and test standard products that provide services to the network operators, and to develop TSO-DSO consumer collaboration platform in demonstration areas to pave the way for interoperable development of a pan-European market. And the Swedish demonstration already had the demonstration this winter in Greece and in Spain. It will come here next year. Next page. So what we have done, we have successfully demonstrated flexibility services for congestion management day ahead in 3 demo sites in Sweden last winter. And the demonstration was between November and March. And the DSO utilizes flexibility services to lower peak demand in the grid during the winter season. And we did have a successful demonstration. Our biggest concern was that it was a mild winter, not that we had the COVID issue. So the mild winter was actually a bigger concern because we didn't have as much flexibility to buy as a normal winter. Next slide. So there was 3 demo sites up and running in Uppland, in Gotland, that's an island, and in Skåne. And the participation of flexibility providers is key for this demonstration. We had 12 flexibility providers participating with around 20 different resources, and one was an aggregator aggregating 340 houses. And we only had one demonstration site that had a bigger volume cleared at the market, and that was Uppland. And all this clearing and purchase was lower than expected due to the mild winter. That was the main reason why it was lower than expected. We do have target to have more flexibility providers participating, but also not only working with the day-ahead market, also working with the intraday market, and also working with an MFR market in the same platform. So that's the development that we are doing now. And we are also working with having a peer-to-peer market. Next page. So, as I already said, in the beginning of this year, the COVID-19 didn't give us any critical impact. But we are concerned that the engagement before the next demonstration next winter with the intraday market, the MFR market, and also the peer-to-peer market will be lower because of COVID-19. COVID-19 could change prioritization among potential flexibility providers. And we have done some countermeasures. One, we have made all meetings digital. And most of the meetings have worked well. Follow-up meetings has worked well, I would say. Also conferences discussing coordination and product design has worked well. But I do think the engagement meetings are a little bit harder, having them only digital. We have had a lot of people participating, but it's not as easy to see the reaction and from the participants to be able to read, are they interested? Do we have to have follow-up discussions? In what way? This is more hard to do in a digital way. So we made all the meetings digital. We also adjusted cascading funds for the next demonstration We will also have cascading funds. And we have made them a little bit easier also to apply for bigger companies if we don't have enough amount of flexibility providers. But the small companies are prioritization, but we open them up also for bigger companies because we are a little bit worried that, like I said before, the prioritization among potential flexibility providers could change. Perhaps they will not put the time in this in participating on these kind of markets. And what did we learn? I think that some of the digital meetings were a success, I would say. We had a lot of well-visited and good arranged meetings. But so I think we will have more of digital meetings in the future. But I also think that we need to combine them with physical meetings. Next slide. So are there bigger issues for the energy transition that could be affected? One question is, will results be all relevant due to COVID-19 effects? In our case, like I told you before, the mild winter was actually making the results less relevant because a mild winter and a normal winter and a cold winter are quite different things. And the last winter was the mildest ever in Sweden. But also we have to look at the statistics if they will be affected by COVID-19. And I think especially regarding engagement. If you look a little bit in the bigger society, will there be lower investments in renewable energy and batteries because of the COVID crisis and the financial effects? Will there be a higher interest in using the energy system more efficient because of also financial perspective? I do believe there will be more focus on digitalization. In our organization, there will be. And I think also we will travel a little bit less, and digitalize more. But I would say regarding climate issues, I think it's hard to estimate the effect. Trends could be in both directions, even if we will work on having a fossil-free future and working with climate mitigation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne, for your testimony. And then we go to the next speaker. That's Ricardo André, who will talk about his project.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the organization, for this invitation to be here, and welcome to our attendants who will be listening during the next minutes. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I will not lose too much time introducing Intergrid, just to highlight the big, next slide please, the big numbers. So it is a 15 million euros project coordinated by EDP Distribuição and funded by the European Union EUSEW2020 program. We start in 2017 and we should finish this June 2020. We have 3 demos, one in Portugal, one is in Slovenia, and one in Sweden. And we have 2 main objectives. So to demonstrate the market enabler rule of the DSO and enable new and disruptive business models for distribution grid stakeholders. And we have a second and always present objectives is to ensure that the DSOs are able to operate the grid in a safe, with high quality and resilient way during these energy transitions, namely increasing the hosting capacity of the grids and ensure that we are ready to the increase of the electrification. So in Portugal and Sweden and Slovenia, so the demonstrators were already in operation in the first quarter of 2020. So in Portugal, the flexibility-based operation of the medium voltage and low voltage grid was up and running, and this flexibility-based operation is made by the usage of flexibility from B2B and B2C customers. So in Slovenia, the VPP applications at medium voltage level are being demonstrated for market applications as well as for grid technical operation. and in Sweden, customer engagement social networks, namely a social network called Local Life, applied to energy, is running, as well as advanced asset management tools for predictive maintenance. A special word to Grid Market Hub, which is a very ambitious and innovative platform, which is able to bridge distribution grid technical needs with the market competitive and market response trends. So we are able here to enable the participation of the flexibility provided by customers for several purposes, either for grid operation or for market participation. Going to the next slide, please. So very little flavor on what we already achieved. So we have more than 100 KPIs on the project. These KPIs are calculated based on real operation data. I just picked some of them just to pass the message that Intergrid was up and running before this COVID-19 situation. So we were able to demonstrate that this flexibility is able to support the DSOs to improve the voltage profiles on the distribution grids. We demonstrate that the architecture ICT ecosystem of Intergrid is able to activate the flexibility either at low voltage and medium voltage side. We are more than 40 B2B customers registered in this GM hub and more than 300 B2C customers registered in this grid market hub and participating in the demos. So in terms of assets, flexibility assets that we have installed, we have more than 400 controllable low voltage residential devices installed in customers' premises. We have grid-tied utility scale storage devices, also an important source of flexibility, and 5 advanced EV chargers with for flexibility advanced usage and providing flexibility for the DSO. In terms of savings, so the direct participants on Intergrid were able to save in some situations up to 50% of their energy, and we are able to reduce the average peak on something like 14%. As you are aware, this peak demand is a critical aspect or a critical driver for the sizing of the grid and to the development of the grid. So going to the next slide, please. Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic, so it blocked the demonstration of Intergrid for several reasons. Namely, the site works were cancelled or postponed. Only critical grid works were possible in the demonstration countries due to the pandemic situation. The customer contact actions were forbidden, so the works on customer premises were cancelled, postponing some integration of some of the smart appliances, and also due to the lockdown, access to companies were blocked, so namely the access to critical systems like SCADA were no longer possible, and this also blocked the demonstration. So going to the next slide, please. Also, the consumption profiles did change a lot, either at low voltage, since people were sent back home, so their consumption profile did change. And due to the lockdown, the industrial consumption also changed. Can you just run the animation, please? Just two touches, please. And once more. So I can demonstrate here that in some customers, more than 90% of their consumption was reduced, and we have an increase of almost 3 times in some of the residential consumers. Okay, did change a lot. Even the grid load profiles, but also the flexibility that was supposed to be available. I mean, if a factory or a plant is closed, where is the flexibility that I need to operate my medium voltage grid? Okay, this change a lot. Although the renewables volatility in terms of profile, well, COVID did not impact neither the wind, neither the sun. So this volatility and impact in distribution grid is still there. So going to the next slide, please. So on the top of this, as it is public, so EDP Group suffered a cyber attack during April. We are very proud that EDP Distribuição OT infrastructure was not affected. So this is a very good example why the DSOs are so carefully when managing their ICT critical infrastructure. Neither the energy supply in Portugal was affected, but as mitigation measures, all the non-critical accesses to our ICT infrastructure were disconnected, and this led to the shutdown of Integrid as a mitigation measure for the whole company. So during 3 months, we are now restoring the full access to Integrid's ICT infrastructure. Now this is being recovered, but during 3 months we were affected by this as well. So going to the next step, please, to the next slide, please. So as mitigation countermeasures, so what we did was to anticipate all the report writing effort. As you are aware, these H2020 funded projects have a significant writing effort. So we anticipate everything we could. We also did optimize the demonstration testing plan so that as soon as we have conditions, we can go back to the demonstration at full speed. We changed the dissemination mindset. So from face-to-face meetings and face-to-face dissemination events, we went to remote webinars and so on. And some of the appliances, namely the home energy management system, there was missing to install still up to 50 hams. So we are doing this commissioning remotely. So we are sending these equipments to the customer's premises, and we are doing the commissioning remotely. Going to the next slide, please. So although all these mitigation measures, so we were forced to ask to the European Union to postpone the Integrid due date for 4 months. So we will now, and is already formally accepted by European Union. So we'll finish Integrid in 4 months from now in October 2020. The extension is only focused on demonstration works. So all the remaining work on cost-benefit analysis, scalability, and so on can already be delivered. And we have more 4 months to finish the demonstration works. We'll mainly working in Portugal for the demonstrate grid operation flexibility tools in complementary scenarios, as well as in Sweden, demonstrating the abilities of these customer engagement tools and asset management tools in alternative scenarios. Going to the next slide, please. So we were a victim of COVID-19, and this was a really important opportunity to learn. So in terms of project management, so in terms of risk management, such externalities, since they have a very low likelihood, are sometimes not considered, or we don't pay the necessary attention to them. It's something that we have to improve for sure. When we go deep in terms of ICT integration, as we did in Integrid, we are developing these innovative concepts on the top of EDP Distribuição Integrid ICT infrastructure. So we are forced to follow the same strict rules in case of extreme events. A rule of thumb, so we must always be effective when we can, namely in early stage of the project, so that we can have flexibility and time to manage the impacts of these externalities. We were forced to adapt us, and we are now fully aware that telcos and remote events can most of times replace physical events, and saving here some travel expenses. And a special word for our team, because it's in hard moments that you understand how strong and committed is your team, and I'm very proud to work in this consortium. Going to the next slide, and the last one, please. So
yes, Ricardo, can you finish in 1 minute, please? Because we have a bit of delay in the session. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, just the last, the previous, what was the previous slide, but I can just speak. So we, as humankind, in kind of survival spirit, so we were really flexible in terms of behavior change. This behavior change will impact the energy consumption profiles for transport to industry, and the respective technical solutions must cope with this behavior change. I believe that it's still early to understand how the energy policies should cope with this, but I think that as today, resilience and flexibility reality, these buzzwords have never made so much sense. During the last years, we were working towards, let's say, some trends, as I show on the right-hand side of the slide, the debt curve. Okay, this was a reality for the last 5 years. But when people are adapting their behavior, probably some trends will change. Okay, so just finishing. So this COVID-19 was something that, at least in my generation, I never expected we could pass a situation like this. But we cannot change the past. What we can do is to shape the future and be ready, because probably external extreme events like this will keep following us. Okay, thank you very much, and I pass the word to Thomas, our moderator. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. As it was said, we are a bit over time, so I'll basically only ask the top question that has come in, and I'll give that to Manuel in relation to maybe answering on whether it would be an idea for the Bridge Task Force or the Bridge Group to actually establish a task force about the COVID-19 risk mitigations. Would that be something that the projects would be interesting from your point of view?
Well, that's definitely something to be discussed with projects. We have learned through the questionnaire that has been run that by the end of the day, only the projects that were facing the demonstrations have been directly impacted by the crisis. Now, who knows for how long the crisis will be here, and definitely we all need to adapt ourselves. It is important also to mention that the Commission has already published a report on good practices to address pandemic situations. So let's see how much the bridge projects could fit into the learning on how to manage and operate research projects. It is difficult to see at this stage, but this is definitely something that needs to be further explored, not only with the projects participating in the regulatory working group of Bridge, but with all projects, because this is something transversal to all of us.
Thank you very much for that. I'll also remind all attendees that we are launching a Slido poll at the end of the last speaker session, so please give your opinion on that. Right now, it's my pleasure actually to give the floor to Pierre-Jacques Lequelec, who is actually leading the iElectrics project. He'll be speaking about the measures taken in relation to international collaboration in relation to the COVID crisis. Here you go, Pierre-Jacques.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So I will speak about the iElectrics project. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just some words about the project. The main objective of this project is to develop and experiment solutions to facilitate the integration of distributed renewable energy sources, and also to prepare the advent of local energy communities. This project includes 5 real-scale demonstrations. There will be one in Germany, one in Austria, and 2 in Hungary, and another one in India. Next slide, please. So we'll focus on this Indian demonstration. So this Indian demonstration will implement urban microgrid in the premises of a high school in the northern part of Delhi, already equipped with rooftop PV panels. Our Indian partner is Tata Power Delhi Distribution, is one of the DSOs operating in Delhi area. Where we are now, we have completed all the design and specifications, and we have started we can say the purchasing phases and the manufacturing phase also will come very soon. Next slide, please. So what was the impact of the crisis on our demonstration? First of all, we can say that in France we have faced a lockdown, and this has blocked, the manufacturing of equipment, especially because the different equipment of this demonstration are built in France. So we are speaking about energy storage system, and also transformers and other electrical equipment. We have seen also an activity slowdown from the different suppliers, and we faced some problem with communication. Since the beginning of the project, which started approximately 1 year ago, we were using the Zoom conference tool, which was really good because we can use easily the video with our partner. But there was a ban of this software due to cybersecurity reasons. So we face this problem in France. Next slide, please. So in India. So in India, it's another type of problem that we face. First of all, India has engaged a stringent lockdown. It was very serious. And the consequence for our project was we have to repatriate our French representative in Delhi. So it was more difficult, of course, to communicate with our colleagues in India. It was also more difficult to communicate with them because they have to telework, and the infrastructure in Delhi is not so good for internet. So sometimes it was difficult to catch them, to have a good connection with them. Tata Power Delhi also faced some problem to go on demo site. In fact, they couldn't at the beginning. And also it was impossible for them to meet customers. So all customer engagement activities have been blocked, we can say. And there was a delay in the preparatory engineering works over there. Tata Power Delhi, as a DSO, has faced also an increase of unpaid electricity bills by the customers, which has bring a decreasing of cash flow for them. And also we have seen, as in many countries, a decrease in the demand of electricity. Please, can you go to the next slide? So the countermeasures that we have tried to put in place, the three first countermeasures concern the communications. It's really important to communicate with our partner, especially during this critical phase. And in fact, from the very beginning of the project, we have established a weekly call with them, with our Indian partners, but also with all the European partners involved in this demonstration. So we have to change the communication tools, and it was not so easy to find a good one working for everybody. We have to avoid using the video facility. This is something that's important for our colleagues in India. And we have also to adapt the slot to communicate with many suppliers. We have tried also to prepare all the possible tasks that we can do without the presence of people at site, at the demo site. And we have tried to find out some alternative solution to reduce the demo cost, which was not so easy to achieve. And we couldn't organize a remote conference with the Indian customers. It was really not possible. We have also tried to find some alternative manufacturing solutions in India, and it was also not possible. So please, can you go to the next slide? So the lesson learned. So the first point is really important. We think that it's really important to have a good communication tools, especially with the Asian people. In India, they really like to communicate with a video camera on. It's a good way to maintain a trusting and long-lasting collaboration with them. And we are more human relation-oriented than in Europe. This is an important point. We have seen also the importance to have a local representative for this project. Is facilitate a lot the communication and the interface with our partner, Indian partner. In India also, we can see that it is important to engage the customer from the very beginning of the project, because after it's quite difficult during this period of COVID. I think there is another things that can be put in place in the future European call for projects involving non-European partners, such as Indian partners. We think that it is important to apply, to establish a local funding scheme for the demo, because otherwise they are not so, really linked with the money. There is a risk here. And also we have seen the importance to develop digital solutions for distribution system operators. I can tell you that Tata Power Delhi have seen that quite increase in the online billing for their customers. During the crisis, 90% of the customers who paid through this online billing, and normal situations is only 60%. And the smart meters also that has been deployed by Tata Power Delhi, it's also a good thing for the future as DSO. So you can go to the next slide. So concerning the energy transition, the first point is a fact. It was amazing to see Delhi with a blue sky during the day, which is not at all normal. And this is due, of course, to the lack of vehicle traffic during the lockdown, and also the degrees of human activities over there. The second point is more a question. The Indian government, they have a quite aggressive program for renewable energy sources, and we hope that it will continue in the future to solve this problem of air pollution. For the two other points, these also are facts. There is a change of consumer behavior during this teleworking period. And the degrees, we have seen also degrees of energy consumption in the offices and industry, obviously. And I have read also that some big Indian IT companies, they plan to have more than 70% of people working in home in 2025. So we can see here a change of consumer behaviors. And the last but not the least point is the speed up of digitalization of distribution network. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is my presentation. So thank you for your attention, and I can reply to any question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will leave the floor to Joanna Ofken. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, I can almost say good afternoon. It's almost 12 o'clock. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for organizing this session, and thanks for still being on board. I mean, we're talking about this situation of having these online meetings, and they're always difficult, and you have to hang on and hold on in front of the computer. So I hope I can, inform you and inspire you with my presentation in the next 7 minutes. I keep it very short, I hope. Yes, I am a representative of the Muse Grids project. I'm a work package leader of the end-user engagement activities. The stuff I'm talking about will not only be my own or our own work from the TU Eindhoven, this is where I am based at, but we also present, I'll also sort of pitch in some stuff I, of course, got to know from my partners at the demo sites themselves. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just short and quick. Important, I think, to know. Manuel said that already, and we heard that throughout the presentation. So, and Yvonne as well. So, our project has just started. It's a new one. So we have really different challenges. I think we are much more flexible than other projects are. Yeah? So that's important to know. The second point here is just shortly, our project is really about demonstrating, doing stuff out there. And we do that, what we call in the context of local energy communities, which is where sort of our, or at least my work focuses on. On the slide, you see that we have different demo sites, mainly in Italy and Belgium, but we also have other sites out there. We call them virtual, where we just sort of test some of the stuff. Most of the stuff is really being tested in Italy and in Belgium. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is heaven, at least for social scientists as me. This is great, but because you can see that, oh, this is user engagement. Maybe you can say par excellence, there are many forms of it. And we were just very lucky that we could actually do this, very intensive, not 1.5 meter interaction with people, totally a no-go right now. In February still, we were just before everything locked down, and I just wanted to share that with you, that there are times, and hopefully they're changing again, so this can be possible. The second important point from that slide I want you to sort of take on board is that, yes, again, our focus on this idea of energy communities and how important they are in the transition. And of course, we are also, questioning that, but that is a different discussion. I mean, how much can we burden them, etc. But that's a total different discussion. Now, energy communities are important here. We see something going on in Spain, but in Italy also we had interactions where we went from door to door. You can already put on the next slide, please. Yeah, so here we see another nice, the nice world where COVID was not officially detected yet in Belgium, where we sort of go with our end users to, here at a windmill site to sort of get a little bit more feel and touch what we are all doing, because we've heard all these presentations now that for many people this is very abstract if we talk about loads and the different loads of energy, etc. So in that sense, here we're trying to make that a little bit more feel and touch. So, and yes, you can just go for the next slide. I give it to you now. So this is also a nice one. Another end user engagement. You can go to the next slide. Now, the whole point is, of course, it also infected us. And of course, I mean, it's not surprising that when I tell you, yes, I mean, just as the others, we had to be flexible. That, I guess, is, I think, one keyword we can sort of take on board or for the discussion later. And yes, we are also affected, both in Europe, but we also work in India. And I think what we really can see is that, of course, just as you, I mean, not being able to be in contact with our, with the people at the really receiving end, this is really difficult, especially when your research is exactly about that. And what I said, so flexibility is one, and even luck is another one, which we sort of the circumstances made it possible that we could still do something in the beginning. Next slide, please. And this is a slide basically says it's outdated, and we've heard more from Pierre-Jacques, but I think the situation in Europe, as difficult and impactful as it was, when we compare that in other parts of the world, and we work in India, this is almost, we could say no comparison. So I've just yesterday I talked to our partners there. So the infection rates are raising, and it's still very difficult there. Next slide, please. And not only, the COVID situation, but the general socioeconomic situation is difficult there. But we also have these extreme difficult situation caused by, well, I would say climate change in the end. And here it's Cyclone Amphan. In our case, we work in the Sundarbans, which is in West Bengal, which is, sort of very much in the north and the east. So there was a huge cyclone, basically destroying a lot. And our demo site hasn't started yet there, but we will have to cope with these effects as well. Yeah. So just as, sort of putting COVID in a range of situations we in projects have to deal with. And I think all of my colleagues here say, oh, yes, I mean, we recognize that. Next slide, please. Okay, so of course the question is, what can we do? And I mean, much has been said already. Yeah. So this movement online, of course, that's also what we've done. We have, switched to questionnaires. We have switched to phone interviews, and I think one of the lessons we really, I learned that this. I think we all know that sort of sitting behind the computer in front of these sort of static fields, the interaction and the enthusiasm to join this meeting is not very high. So I guess thinking about different forms, making them shorter, making them more interactive, and we're trying to do that with our Slido things. So I think the countermeasures here again, going online and changing also the format. We can't give presentations for half an hour, so that's why I have to be quick. Of course, and postponing. And for us, in our case, we can postpone. We've heard other colleagues here that said we can't postpone anymore. We're at the end of our project. And so in that sense, here I can only share what we're doing now. And I think one of the learnings, maybe next slide. Yeah. Of course, at the university, we do theoretical work, but we're going to go to next slide, please. Now, what we really have to, what we learned, of course, is this idea of flexibility and resilience that has been said before. And I think that's an interesting one. And I think it's a word which is for us, we have to be flexible and sort of think about new forms. But I guess also in terms of the way the European Commission or, so the whole, administration behind our projects is also, asked and is also willing to be more flexible and to be more adjustable. So I think this trickles down in different areas here. So flexibility one, and of course the other one is that we say that conducting research online definitely, of course, has its limit, but it can go. I think one of the next slide, please. Yeah. So what I'm sort of a little bit wary about is this idea of, especially for us social scientists, so to say, we just do it all online. And I think also this, sort of the data, using data, inobtrusive data from practices at homes, for example. So the question is, is all this sort of, I called it, is the data, digital data, is that equal social data? So we have to be careful in this belief in this digitalization. Flexibility, I talked about that. And of course, interaction. Sometimes I rather call than I do this Zooms and these GoToMeetings. So I mean, the different way to deal with that, we've heard about that. And now comes my last slide, I think. Next slide, please. Now, okay, hoping to sort of end on I actually end on a negative note, but I say that now first maybe. So I think what we can really have to be, we should not leave anyone behind. And I think this idea of sort of reaching all the people in their homes or online is of course not true, because there are many older people also on our sites who don't even have maybe they have an iPad, but they wouldn't know how to sort of Skype or have some kind of Zoom meetings on that. So this idea of leaving no one behind, and I'm not even talking about the situation in India where we already heard Pierre-Jacques about many issues starting with the internet connection, for example. So at the same time also, yes, as I said, I want to end on a positive note. Hey, I think what we can learn, yes, we can act swiftly, radically, and impactfully. I mean, in that sense, swiftly, all of us, you heard that how all of us changed and adjusted. And I hope that this COVID-19 is really a chance where we have reflected. We have seen many quotes in the previous presentations where we reflect and use this chance now to make everything possible that we, in the end, really transition towards a greener, better, more just energy situation and systems. Thanks for this. And with this, I'm going to give back to the moderators. I'm looking forward to our discussion coming on. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Johanna. a lot of good presentations, and now it's actually time for you in the audience to give us feedback. We are launching now a word cloud where we want you to reflect a little and give us up to 3 keywords in relation to a question about how this energy transition is actually affected by the crisis. So join in on the slido.com and give us the feedback. Just a very brief reflection on my side with all the good questions coming in. We can see that this is actually something that is very relevant for people to discuss. There are a lot of questions in relation to both the economical aspects, technological aspects, and of course the aspects of whether people will be able to meet and what is the difference of meeting behind a screen and an actual person. And I can really see that there are even different opinions on this. It needs to have discussions, I guess, both in the projects and maybe also across projects to be solved. Chris, do you have a reflection?
Yeah, I'm now looking at some responses which are already coming in, and I see that what we see is that there is an increase in awareness that's becoming quite big. So a lot of people are agreeing on that. And then we also see some other effects. So there is some slower transport of electrification, which we see. A lot of words coming in right now. New mobility, yeah, that's a rephrasing of that one, nice one.
Very good. So yeah, please keep the words coming in. And while you're maybe still putting in new words, I'll basically take the opportunity to very briefly ask each of the presenters to reflect a little on a question here. So maybe first to Manuel. In your eyes, will the use of IT be influenced by the COVID crisis within customers, within businesses? So how do you think that will basically be affected by this?
I mean, yes, indeed. I mean, in the experience of the countries that has suffered this crisis the most, we have learned not only to use IT in our work, or to use even more IT, because by the end of the day we are technologists, so we are already used to this kind of tools. But we have learned that all the communications with the teachers in the schools of our kids, everything with the municipality, with any provider, now it has to be run with IT means. You go to the restaurant and you don't have any paper. You have to download the app of the restaurant to see what you can eat. So the use of IT, it's here as a countermeasure of the COVID in general, and in the energy sector, it's even more. What is important is what Johanna has mentioned: not to leave anyone behind. I mean, not everyone was already prepared to understand the electricity bill, for instance. So we cannot expect everyone to be ready to just configure a system in their house just to get the most of the equipment that they have. This is something that we need to be aware of.
Okay, very, very good reflections. Maybe going on then to Yvonne, in relation to also the COVID crisis, do you actually see a change in the more strategic thinking, for example, in relation to DSOs and TSOs that are obviously handling a big part of the whole energy system?
I see 2 important things. The first thing is digitalization of the DSOs. I think that we have to improve. We are not today front runners regarding digitalization, but meeting this kind of crises, it's good to be very digitalized, very good in knowing how to have meetings online. And I think there is an improvement area there. So we will be better prepared for different kind of crises, and also perhaps a little bit a new way of working every day in a more climate neutral way. And secondly, I think that a crisis like COVID reflects that we have a future that is more changeable, that is not as predictable. And I think the power system has to meet that kind of to be more flexible for different kind of situations. And I do believe that the awareness in these issues is not high enough. I could actually say one third thing. If you look at, for example, flexibility providers, energy communities participating in the energy system, I think we have to give them better business models, because when the future is more uncertain, the business model has to be more secure. So I would say that would be three giveaways here.
Thanks a lot, Yvonne. And that may be a keyword for you, Ricardo. So speaking of community mobilization, do you believe that what is happening now might actually boost the behavior transition into these measures that are needed now? Ricardo?
Yeah, I'm facing some communication issues. Hope you can hear me well. So if I understood correctly your question, I believe so. I mean, all this pandemic situation reinforced the community spirit and the commitment of the community for a common cause. So we change behaviors and mindset with a so fast rate that no one could believe this in the past. So that we could survive to this pandemic situation. So we prove that we are flexible enough and resilient enough so that the best of us can overcome, especially on the top of so ambitious project and novel project like the European Union. And this is the spirit that we need that is necessary to face the energy transition. So we need to be flexible so that our energy consumption can be flexible enough. So is this open mind to add to new energy services so that the flexibility of our energy consumption can enable the distribution grid to be the basis for this energy transition, so that we can house more renewables and we can deliver new energy services to our end users. So I believe this is what is necessary, and this is in terms of spirit, so that we can tackle the energy transition.
Thanks a lot. Very good reflections, I think. And it might actually then bring us to a question also of the more international happening. We've seen in now at least two of the presentations that it is a great impact. So Pierre-Jacques, what do you think of this crisis in a more global view? Will it accelerate or slow down the energy transition in India, where you're actually working?
Yes, I think the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown has put India's energy model at risk, but it's too early to predict whether there will be a big change. For sure, there will be a recovery period with some recession in India, but I hope the best, and I hope that it will accelerate the energy transition for India.
Yeah. And then maybe, Johanna, in relation to the discussions or the presentations you had about engagement and research in respect to that, where should we pay attention in relation to getting good engagement research in this project now?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Well, I think, of course, this answer comes a little bit on sort of wearing my researcher hat here, but I think, of course, that can also be translated to, more generally. So I think, when we ask about, okay, so what can we learn? What should we pay attention to in that crisis, and what is, in this crisis relating to the energy transition? I think what we've been saying and what we are trying, but I think we have to really try even more to have these these justice and social issues very much central. So I think this idea of what I said before, so we can't digitalize, automatize everything and sort of draw all conclusions only from some kind of technologies without sort of embedding them, contextualizing them. And I think that's an obvious point I make, but I think it's it is important to stress again, so that again, I mean, when we engage, let's not forget. Most of the time, what we can see that many of the demonstration projects, they're taking place either in areas which are quite wealthy or often quite wealthy in Europe, so where we have solar panels on the roof and we have apps on our smartphones. But I think that is not the case everywhere. So I think when thinking about energy transitions, then let's not forget those who are often marginalized, not so much on the forefront, and that is true also in COVID times. Yeah, so I guess that is something which is a point which I would even make beyond that. So I guess that's my point here, coming from that side. So putting on the agenda, yes, let's justice and social issues. Focus has to be there as well, even beyond COVID. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all presenters. I think we've seen a lot of very interesting aspects being presented here. One of the key learnings that definitely I'm taking away from this is related to some of the difficulties both in working internally in the projects. How can you actually make a good environment for working together when you're all basically grounded where you are stated? There are some things that needs to come out of this, and we can see from the word cloud that is still being built that people actually do see a lot of new elements coming out of this: increased awareness, chances, more flexibility, new mobility. So it basically take people to a whole new level of thinking, and basically I think encourages people also to take action. And I think what has also been shown from what most of the presenters here has said is that, well, actually this crisis also did show us that we are able to change also in a very, very rapid way. So that might be one of the key takeaways. Chris, do you have reflections?
Sorry, I was muted. What I learned from these examples is that you hear a lot now that digitalization is very important, but that actually it should be a mix of approaches, and reaching out to not only participants in projects but also to our colleagues still stays very important. So I think we should see how we can do a good mix for that, and how we can plan for this if we would come in such a situation again.
Exactly. Yeah, and I also see in the questions coming in that some people are requesting maybe to have some cross work, at least. The report is even being mentioned, whether the key learnings could be kind of collected between the different projects. A lot of people are discussing whether the use of digital engagement tools could be further developed. Could we learn something from the fact that it's not always working perfectly? I think while we're sitting here also within this session, we see both the pros and cons directly, that, well, we're not together. You cannot go grab a coffee and discuss some elements afterwards. And I think one of the things that we need probably also to take away from this is that we probably need to be able to communicate also on a more regular basis, following up on these issues, creating forums maybe for discussions in relation to how can we tackle these issues, and when new issues are coming up. As it was also mentioned, it's clear that we still do not have an overview. We don't know when this will end? Will we go back to normal? Probably not. What is normal? There are a lot of questions that are coming up and are being discussed and raised. And it's also being encouraged very much in the questions that it's probably, we had already a steep learning curve, but we also need to keep discussing within the projects and probably knowledge share, basically what it is that we're doing, be able to share good ideas, knowledge. We have maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes left in relation to asking questions. So we could take the opportunity to take some of the high-level questions here presented on the screen, specifically maybe in relation to the countries, which is now the most high-ranking questions. So Ricardo, it might be on you to reflect a little on whether you see that the partners in the projects, depending on country, have been affected differently.
The question was to me, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, of course, it depends on the rule of each partner. In our case, in EDP Distribuição as the DSO, and in this case also leading the Portuguese demonstrator, and this is common to Eletro Ljubljana in Slovenia and to Ellevio in Sweden. So we were on the middle of the action. I mean, we are running the demonstration, and for sure, this COVID-19, the social distance, the lockdown affect us a lot. Okay, not only our operations in the company, but in the project particularly. For other partners that can done their work by distance, by remote, in a remote way, like the partners like DNVGL or Comilhas that are working on CBA analysis, on economics or scalability, well, those partners were not affected as much as we. Okay, so just summarizing, it depends a lot on the stage of the project that you are, and depends also on the role of each partner on the project. Okay.
Thanks a lot. And then maybe, Ivan, one for you here. Do you have any experience in relation to ensuring good collaboration? Did you discuss that in the project at all, whether it has been influenced by this situation we are in and we are all just able to communicate via all these digital means?
I think because we already had established communication and dialogue between the partners, both in the Swedish demo, but also in the European consortium. So we already had the basis to build on. It was easier to work on a digital way. So I think you can never only work digital. You also have to combine with the physical meetings, but I think you can work more digital.
Okay, thanks a lot. It makes sense. Then maybe a question on the EU infrastructure policies. It's been asked whether it's successful in enabling the deployment of smart grid and flexibility markets. Would any of you speakers have comments to this question? Manuel, maybe, or Pierre-Jacques? If not, I guess we will just basically also tell everyone in the audience that we will, of course, be collecting these questions coming up afterwards, also with considerations and answers to many of these questions. The way forward here in relation to what will happen next, I think we've gathered a lot of good input from both the presenters, from the audience. So we thank you once again very much for taking this opportunity to share your thoughts with us. It will definitely be a continuing effort to mitigate. We, as I said, we do not have 100% overview of what is happening. And right now, there will be a survey poll coming up for all of you, hopefully to give us the feedback for this session. And it's a closing survey. I hope it's coming up to you now. Please give us your feedback, whether you felt this session was worth it. We hope at least you have had some good thoughts, some ideas, and we will be reflecting upon all of your input, of course, and finding hopefully new ways of getting beyond this crisis and be able to hopefully get the energy transition, if it's not already on track again, we'll ensure that it is being given the best possible opportunities to do that.